I used to think I was a good teacher. I had many years of teaching experience. I had all the certifications. I had the care for my students, and I also had the long-term students who came back to me and who recommended me to their community. This happened after the first 7 or 8 years of teaching and teaching languages in different environments, to different ages, different nationalities, teaching in person, one-to-one, online, in groups, in schools, in companies, doing paid and volunteering teaching work. After those 7, 8, 9 years of being a teacher, where the learning curve and challenging experiences were really steep, the plateauing felt comfortable for a while. I felt happy and pleased with my teaching, skills. But there was something there. As teachers, I think we know that the learning never ends. It never ends for our students who will be forever learning a language, and it will never end for us as teachers who will be forever learning to teach and upgrading our skills and up-leveling our skills, right? So I went through a professional crisis at some point after all those, as I said, maybe 9 years of teaching, and I went through a crisis, and so I went to look for answers outside of the teaching industry and the language industry. And so I started to look at the coaching industry and the mental health and arts, and all those areas provided me with different pieces of the puzzle, of the teaching puzzle. And at that point, I redefined my language education business and started creating courses and programs that fostered creativity, like poetry. Poetry has been a really important part in my career. Reflective journaling and critical thinking elements, all combined with the language learning process. And then I created immersive and experiential retreats and focused on my students' inner journey as language learners rather than the language as something that was outside of their lives and they had to get to. And this, at that time, I'm talking about 2014, 15, 16, that was the time of my first retreat, that was not a common practice. It really wasn't. And that's why it was challenging for me for a while at the beginning, because I felt I had to convince everyone in my industry about those things, about the importance of experience and experiential learning and creativity and paying attention to mental health at the same time. And at the time, I felt, at the beginning, I felt that my methods were considered too woohoo or esoteric, and I felt at some point that I was addressed as if I was a lunatic, really. But over time, and that was really nice, over time I started, the things started to change, and journaling and creativity, playing with the language started to be a little bit more mainstream. And I could see other colleagues resorting to creativity and introspection, and even organized their own retreats, which were very successful. And with this, I don't want to say I was a pioneer. I was the first one, and they were, following me in any way. I just think that that was in the air, and some of us maybe picked up that quicker, and some other people just picked up that energy, that thing later. So I wasn't, the only one by any means. But yeah, so after a little while, I felt in me and in my business another plateau. And I started to feel again the need to up-level myself and my business. And this plateauing came pretty fast. So my first retreat was 2016. By 2018, 19 even, I was feeling there was something missing that I had to grow into. There was something in the future that was emerging, and I had to embody that. So at that time, there were already advances and papers and studies and research in neuroscience and alternative ways of approaching language learning or language acquisition and education. And many of them were telling us about the benefits of mindfulness and certain activities to create an adequate mental state for learning. And then it was easy for me to delve into learning about neuroeducation and language, and my tendency, because I already started to consider the impact of mental health in the learning process, I started to explore and study about the therapeutical uses of poetry, for example, poetry being my my pet peeve, and coaching. And then I got to understand different behaviors and conditioning and limiting beliefs that impact our learning process, and that are often overlooked by teaching trainings. And remember that I did mine many years ago, but after that I have been taking teaching training courses provided by different entities all throughout my career, right? And none of those courses at the time were really focusing seriously about conditioning and cultural impact and behaviors and limiting beliefs, or the things that were normal in coaching but were not normal in teaching, whereas I find that both areas overlap. So along with that, in my personal development, I turned my eyes to embodiment. See, I have never been a good meditator. I've tried many times, I'm still trying, but meditating doesn't really work well for me, or not often. Sometimes it does, but not often. So what really works for me is stretching and dancing or moving, even singing, exercising. That really brings me to the body, to my body, clear my mind, and change my energy. They have a very similar impact that meditating does. So very, very similar. So embodiment, it's been a really key element in how I see the world and how I approach my life and work. So at that point, and I think it was about 2 years ago, or maybe, something like that, I self-appointed myself as an embodied language teacher or coach, and it has never been, and that has never meant that I was a language coach in the common sense, as in I wasn't guiding my learners to to learn a language better or find their own ways to learn, per se. And I wasn't an embodiment coach in the sense that I wasn't focusing the sessions in guiding the learner to connect to their bodies. It was kind of a combination. And what I understood and what I understand by an embodied language coach is someone who is guiding the learner to learn the language and connect to the language with the help of their bodies. That is, that they are bringing their bodies and their senses along with the journey. And that involves mindfulness and embodiment and practices that go along the experience of the language through the body. So finally, the last key of the puzzle is in this journey of up-leveling my teaching practice was to 2020 and the pandemic, and 2020 kicked in and we stayed in, and social media exploded in a way. Well, for me at least, and I think I wasn't the only one. The first year, I'd say, of the pandemic had social media had a very important role in how I experienced the world. And there were a lot of social issues that emerged and were super visible all the time through social media. And it was kind of a constant bombardment of reality, if you want. There was a renewed, more tangible, visceral and unavoidable to look at awareness of social issues that emerged from or were a result of colonialism, the impact of our economic systems, inequality, racism, power structures, and the trauma that exists in every body. And that was the part that interested me the most. Every body that comes to us, teachers, to learn. So I was, at that point, I realized that I had to pay attention to my learner and their own experience of reality and how my own experience of reality impact that relationship. So I have taken by now many courses about trauma-informed teaching and coaching, and I have been for the past 2 years. In February 2020, I'm working closely with an experienced psychotherapist who is my mentor, and we work around the issues that can arise in the context of a one-to-one or group class, language learning class, and how trauma shows up in learners of any age. And we work around how or about conscious and unconscious behavioral patterns, and along with that I'm learning about culture and mindset and how the paradigm we live in, which is a patriarchal, colonial, capitalist society, impacts every aspect of our lives. And if we agree that everything is connected and that everything is relational, and most importantly that everything has an impact on everything else, then this is the up level that my life, my business and my teaching career needed. And so the question then and the question now is, how can I go about teaching a language without questioning the paradigm in which my teaching exists? And this has been the work I've been doing the past couple of years, and what has brought me to the creation of this teaching training, this language teacher and coach development training and mentoring, because I think this is necessary for us teachers and coaches who are in relation with other individuals. We need to be aware of the impact of trauma that is very common in us, how it impacts the way we learn, the way we study, the way we relate to our teachers and coaches, and also from the perspective of the teacher, living in this paradigm impacts the way we teach and the way we relate to our language and the students' mother tongue or language and culture. So all this needs to be brought to the forefront. And so that's why I would invite you, language teacher, language coach, to have a look at this training and see if this is something that is relevant for you now, if you feel that your clients, your students may benefit from you up-leveling your career in this